My fiancée demanded a $60,000 wedding and called me cheap for offering $10,000. I ended the engagement. But when she found a rich lawyer who could afford everything, he dumped her for the exact same reason, and now she's begging for forgiveness. But I bought my dream cabin in cash. I'm 31 years old. I work as a network technician, and I make decent money. I mean, I'm not a millionaire, but I'm not doing badly either. Let's say I live comfortably without excessive luxuries. What I'm about to tell you happened about 2.5 years ago, and honestly, it completely changed my perspective on relationships and what really matters in life. Basically, I ended my engagement because my fiancé wanted me to go into debt up to my neck for a ridiculously expensive wedding. And no, I don't regret it at all. But I need to tell this story because there are still people who think I was a heartless cheapskate. I grew up in a small town. My parents worked really hard to support me and my sister Amy. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked in the school cafeteria. You know, those kind of honest jobs that don't make you rich. What they did teach me was the value of money. Like, in my house there was no room for silly expenses or unnecessary debts. I remember perfectly my dad telling me when I was about 12 years old, "Justin, money doesn't grow on trees and debts are chains that tie you down your whole life." Sounds like something any father would say, I guess. But in my house, that wasn't just a saying. It was literally how we lived. We never had credit cards with outstanding balances. We never bought anything we couldn't pay for in cash. And when they finally bought their house, it was after saving for years to put down a huge down payment and have a small mortgage that they paid off in 10 years instead of 30. Those values stuck with me. You know what I mean? When I started working after graduating from technical college, I applied exactly the same thing. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a 2010 Honda Civic that worked perfectly fine, saved about 40% of my salary, and didn't feel deprived of anything, honestly. I went out with my friends, had my hobbies, traveled a couple times a year to affordable places, and I was happy. I didn't need to impress anyone with material things, because, basically, that's how I was raised, and it seemed like the most sensible thing in the world to me. I met Brittany at a party that my friend Chris threw to inaugurate his new house. She was a friend of Chris's girlfriend, and honestly, I thought she was super cute and down to earth. We were in the backyard, and she came over to comment on something about the barbecue. We started chatting and discovered we had several interests in common, like hiking, horror movies, that kind of stuff. What I liked most is that she didn't seem pretentious at all. I mean, she arrived in a normal Mazda, wore jeans and a simple blouse, and looked comfortable eating burgers and drinking cheap beer. I don't know, she gave me good vibes from the start. We started dating, and everything was incredibly natural. Our dates were simple things, like going for walks in the park, cooking together at my apartment, watching movies, going fishing at the lake. That's about half an hour from town. She never complained that I didn't take her to expensive restaurants or that my car was old. In fact, about 3 months into dating, she told me she loved that I was so simple and grounded, that she had dated guys who only wanted to show off and spend money on nonsense. That obviously made me feel like I had found someone compatible, someone who understood what really mattered in life. We spent about 2 years together and everything was going well, you know. We had our normal differences like any couple, but nothing serious. Brittany worked as an administrative assistant at an accounting firm, earned less than me, but it wasn't an issue between us. We split expenses fairly when we went out. Sometimes I paid more because I earned more, and it seemed reasonable to me. But she never expected me to always pay for everything. I met her parents several times. They were, let's say, a bit more materialistic than I was used to. They lived in a house bigger than necessary and always talked about their neighbors and who had what thing, but well, they weren't my parents and I tried not to judge. When we'd been together for 2 years, I decided I wanted to marry her. It seemed like the right decision to me. We were good, we got along great, and I felt like we were on the same page about what was important in life. So I planned the proposal. Nothing extravagant because it wasn't my style, nor did I think it was hers. I took her to the lake where we'd gone on one of our first dates, prepared a simple but nice picnic, and gave her the ring. Oh, the ring. Let me tell you about that because it becomes relevant later. I spent about 3 months' salary on that ring, but I didn't buy the typical super expensive diamond. Instead, I designed a custom one with a blue sapphire as the center stone because Brittany loved blue, and it had small diamonds around it. It cost me about $3,500, which for me was a considerable amount of money but seemed reasonable and meaningful to me. The jeweler helped me create something unique and beautiful, and I was super proud of that ring. When I gave it to her, Brittany cried, said yes, and hugged me saying it was perfect, that the ring was beautiful, and she couldn't believe I had designed it especially for her. We took photos, celebrated with cheap champagne from the supermarket, and drove back home happy. For about a week, everything was perfect. Her friends asked her about the ring. She showed it off on social media with artistic photos and the whole show. And I felt like I had done everything right. But then I started noticing weird things. The first was when we went to dinner at her parents' house to celebrate the engagement. Her mom took her hand to see the ring and said something like, "Oh, how interesting, a sapphire, how different." And the way she said it, was like with that tone of polite disappointment that some people use when they don't like something but don't want to be directly rude. Brittany laughed nervously and said, "Yes, Justin had it specially made. It's unique." But I noticed her enthusiasm had dropped, and that surprised me because days before she was super excited. Her dad asked how much it cost, just like that, directly, and I stayed quiet because it seemed like a super inappropriate question to me. Brittany changed the subject quickly, but the awkwardness was already there. The following weeks, we started with the wedding stuff. I assumed it would be something small and simple, like maybe 50 people. A nice place, but not excessively expensive. Good food, but without pretensions. Music with a DJ or even a well-made playlist. I had seen weddings like that were beautiful and meaningful without costing a fortune. I thought that with about $8,000 or maximum $10,000, we could do something really nice that would leave us with incredible memories without going into debt. Oh, how naive I was, seriously. The first planning meeting was at Brittany's house. She had been looking at things on Pinterest and had like 1,000 tabs open on her computer. I sat next to her excited, thinking we were going to do this together, that it would be a collaborative project where we'd both contribute ideas. Brittany started showing me photos of reception venues, and all of them, were super elegant places, with huge gardens, halls with crystal chandeliers, terraces with views of some spectacular thing. I asked her how much those places cost, and she said, "Oh, well, between $5,000 and $8,000 just for the venue." And I was like, "Wait, just the place? That's almost our entire wedding budget." Brittany looked at me like I had just said something ridiculous and said, "Justin, honey, a wedding doesn't cost $10,000. That's like impossible." I explained that of course it was possible, that I knew people who had done beautiful weddings with similar budgets, that what was important was celebrating with the people we love and not going into debt. She sighed and said, "Well, let's see what we can do." But she seemed clearly annoyed. That was like the first red flag, I guess, but I ignored it, thinking it was just normal wedding planning nerves. Things got worse quickly. The guest list I had in mind was about 50 people, maximum. Basically close family and close friends from both sides. Brittany made her list, and it had over 200 people. When I asked her who all those names were, she told me they were cousins, her parents' friends, co-workers, people from the church her family attended, people like that. I explained that we couldn't afford a wedding for 200 people unless we did something super simple, and she got upset saying she couldn't not invite those people because it would look bad. This weird negotiation started where every time I tried to reduce costs on something, she found a reason why it wasn't possible. The venue she finally chose, basically demanded, was a super fancy event hall in the city, about 45 minutes from where we lived. It cost $7,500 just to rent it for the day. And that didn't include absolutely anything. No chairs, no tables, no decorations, nothing. When I protested, Brittany cried and told me that all her friends had gotten married in beautiful places and that she wasn't going to have a wedding in a community center like we were poor. That phrase hurt me, honestly, because my sister Amy had gotten married in a community center 2 years before, and it had been a beautiful wedding full of love, but whatever. Then came the food issue. Brittany wanted waiter service with a 3-course dinner. Appetizer, main course, dessert, all elegant. The cheapest catering we found for that was about $85 per person. Multiply that by 200 guests, and we're talking about $17,000 just for food. I suggested a buffet or family-style food, which could be just as delicious, but at about $30 per person, and she looked at me with literal disgust and said that was tacky and that her guests expected something better. In my mind, I was like, if your guests are coming expecting luxuries instead of coming to celebrate our love, maybe those aren't the right people to invite. But I didn't say anything at that moment. The photographer she wanted cost $4,500 for the full day. The videographer, another $3,000. The DJ she liked cost $2,000. And that's not counting flowers, which according to Brittany, we needed at least $3,500 in floral arrangements for it to look good. Oh, and she also wanted to hire a wedding planner, because according to her, it was impossible to coordinate all this without professional help, and that was another $2,500 minimum. I started adding all this up in my head and basically went into panic mode. We were talking about more than $40,000 for a wedding. Like, that was almost my entire annual salary before taxes. I showed Brittany the numbers and explained that this was crazy, that I had savings but wasn't going to empty it all on a one-day party, and that I definitely wasn't. I'm going to go into debt for this. She told me I was exaggerating, that everyone spends that or more on weddings, that her friends had $50,000 or $60,000 weddings, and that I was being unreasonable. What really broke my heart was when, about 2 months after starting the planning, I saw the search history on the laptop we sometimes shared because Brittany left it open by accident. She had been searching for things like how to ask your fiancé for a better ring, how to upgrade your engagement ring, celebrity engagement rings, stuff like that. I sat there staring at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. She had been happy with the ring when I gave it to her. Or at least that's what I thought. But apparently it wasn't enough for her. She wanted something bigger, more expensive, more flashy. I didn't say anything about that immediately because I didn't know how to process it, but I started seeing other things. The bridesmaid dresses she chose were Vera Wang and cost $400 each, and she had 6 bridesmaids, so she expected her friends to spend that amount of money. When one of them commented that it was very expensive, Brittany got upset and said that if they really loved her, they'd find a way to pay for it. She was planning a bachelorette party in Miami for 4 days, expecting all her friends to pay for their own flights and accommodation, plus the group activities she wanted to do. I heard these conversations and didn't recognize the woman. I had spent 2 years being happy with simple things. The straw that broke the camel's back was about 4 months into the planning. By that point, I had tried to give in on some things. I had increased my mental budget to about $15,000, thinking maybe I could stretch a bit using part of my savings, but Brittany kept adding things. She wanted a premium open bar with brand-name liquors. She wanted a 5-tier cake from a specific bakery that cost $1,200. She wanted to rent a photo booth with personalized props. She wanted fireworks at the end of the night. Every time I said no to something, she cried or pouted or stopped talking to me for days. Then one day she came to my apartment with a proposal. She sat down with me on the couch, took my hands, and told me very seriously that she had been thinking and had a solution to the budget problem. I got excited thinking she had finally understood that we had to do something more modest, but no, her solution was that we should take out a personal loan to pay for the wedding. She said she had researched and that we could qualify for a $35,000 loan with a reasonable interest rate, that we'd pay it off over 5 years. And that way we could have the perfect wedding without emptying our savings. I sat there processing what I had just heard. She wanted me to go into debt for $35,000 for a one-day party. I explained as calmly as I could that this went completely against my values, that I wasn't going to start our marriage with a huge debt hanging over our heads, that we could use that money for a down payment on a house or investments or real emergencies. I reminded her how I was raised and why unnecessary debt seemed irresponsible and unacceptable to me. Brittany got angry, like really angry. She told me I was cheap, that I didn't value how important this day was to her, that every bride dreams of her perfect wedding and I was taking that away from her. She argued that a loan was normal and acceptable for important things like weddings, that it wasn't different from a car loan or student loan. I tried to explain that those things were investments with long-term value, A car is necessary. Transportation and education increases your earning potential. But a wedding is just an event. A beautiful celebration, yes, but one that doesn't justify going into debt. She didn't want to listen. She yelled that I didn't love her enough to give her the wedding she deserved, and she left my apartment, slamming the door. We didn't talk for 3 days. When we finally saw each other, she brought reinforcements, literally. Turns out she had been talking to her family and somehow convinced my sister Amy that I was being unreasonable. Amy called me and told me I should be more flexible, that Brittany was only going to get married once, supposedly, and that the memories were worth it. I explained my position, but she insisted I could compromise more. That hurt because I thought my own sister would understand me better than anyone about the values we grew up with. Then came the ambush. Brittany organized a dinner at her parents' house, supposedly so we could all talk and reach a compromise. I went thinking it would be a conversation between reasonable adults. Instead, it was basically an intervention where everyone took turns telling me why I was wrong. Her dad started with a speech about how a real man provides for his family and gives his wife what she needs. That he had made sacrifices for Brittany's mom, and that's what was expected of me. Her mom cried, literally cried, saying that her only daughter deserved a beautiful wedding, and how could I be so selfish? Brittany sat there letting her parents attack me, adding comments here and there about how I had the money, but didn't want to spend it on her. At some point, her dad got aggressive, started raising his voice at me, saying that if I really loved his daughter, I'd find a way to make this work. What kind of husband was I going to be if I couldn't even fulfill this one important thing for her? He was pointing his finger at me, invading my personal space, and I felt like my chest was going to explode, but I stayed calm. I explained once more that it wasn't about the money, but about values and financial responsibility, that I loved Brittany, but wasn't going to compromise my principles for an extravagant party. Her mom then said something that made my blood run cold. She said, "Well, if you can't provide adequately, maybe Brittany should reconsider if you're the right man for her." That was like a direct threat, like, give us what we want or you'll lose your fiancé. I looked at Brittany, expecting her to defend our relationship, to say she loved me beyond any fancy wedding, but she just looked down without saying anything. In that moment, I understood that I had lost the woman I fell in love with. If that woman had ever really existed, or if it had just been an act until she got the ring. I stood up from the table, thanked them for dinner with all the irony in the world, and told Brittany we needed to talk privately. She came outside the house with me, and there I asked her directly, "Do you really agree with all this? Do you really want to start our marriage in debt just to impress people who probably won't even remember our wedding in 2 years?" She crossed her arms and told me, yes, that's what she wanted, that it was my responsibility as her future husband to make it happen, and that if I wasn't willing, then maybe we should end this. I don't know what she expected me to do. I guess she thought that threat would make me give in, that the fear of losing her would make me run to the bank to apply for that ridiculous loan. Instead, I took off the engagement ring I was wearing. It was a simple silver band we had bought together as a symbol while the wedding came, and gave it to her. I told her, "You're right. I think we should end this. I want the engagement ring back too." She was in shock. I think she genuinely didn't expect me to end the relationship. She started stammering that, "No, wait, we could talk more." But I had already made my decision. I drove back to my apartment with my heart in pieces, but also with a weird sense of relief. I had seen who Brittany really was, or at least who she was under the influence of her parents and materialistic social expectations, and she wasn't compatible with me. The following days were horrible. She tried to call me like 1,000 times, sent messages saying we could find a middle ground, that we didn't have to borrow that much. But I knew the problem wasn't the exact amount of money. The problem was the entire mindset. The idea that appearances and impressing others was more important than financial stability and shared values. Eventually, she accepted that we had broken up, came for her things from my apartment, gave me back the engagement ring, and we never saw each other again. What she did after was start talking badly about me to everyone. She told our mutual friends that I was a horrible cheapskate who had made her feel worthless, that I had been emotionally abusive with money, that I had never really loved her. Some friends believed me when I told them my version. Others took her side, and I lost several friendships in the process. Even my sister Amy treated me coldly for months, until she finally understood my perspective. The incredible thing, and this is what gives me a certain morbid satisfaction still, is what happened next. About 2 months after breaking up, Brittany started dating another guy. A lawyer who worked in the city, Matthew, like with real money, drove a BMW, lived in a penthouse. The whole package she clearly wanted. I found out through Emily, one of her friends who had been a bridesmaid and who kept talking to me after everything because she knew the truth of what had happened. Emily told me Brittany was super happy, that she had finally found someone who could give her the life she deserved. That whole narrative. About 6 months passed, and one day I got a message from Emily that simply said, "You're not going to believe this." Turns out Brittany and Matthew had also broken up. And guess why? She had been pressuring him to get married after only 6 months together, wanted a super expensive engagement ring, and obviously an even more extravagant wedding because now her boyfriend had more money. Matthew at first agreed to many things, bought her expensive gifts, took her to fancy restaurants, everything she wanted. But when it came time to talk about the wedding and she started with the same ridiculous demands, adding that she wanted a ring of at least $15,000 and a wedding of over $60,000, Matthew told her she was crazy and dumped her. Emily told me that Matthew basically told her she was materialistic and superficial, that she was only interested in his money, and that he wasn't going to be her ATM. He broke up with her by text message, blocking her everywhere, and Brittany had a complete breakdown. Apparently, she tried to contact him 1,000 times, sent him messages from friends' numbers, even went to his office, and he had to call security. It was a total disaster. What surprised me is that after that, about 2 months later, Brittany tried to contact me. She sent me a long message apologizing, saying she had been confused, that her parents had pressured her a lot and she had lost perspective, that I was right about values and priorities. She said she missed me, that I had been the most genuine and good person she had been with, and if we could try again. Obviously, I said no. I didn't even consider it for a second. I replied something polite, saying, I wished her the best, but we each needed to go our own way, and I blocked her everywhere. It's been about 2 years since all that. About 6 months ago, I bought a small cabin near the lake where I had proposed to her. I bought it outright using my savings that I had kept intact. It's my favorite place in the world now. I go there on weekends, fish, read, enjoy the peace. I started dating someone new a few months ago, a girl I met in a hiking group, and it's incredibly refreshing to be with someone who values the same things I do. We've talked about what happened with Brittany because I don't want to have secrets, and she understands me completely. In fact, she says she admires that I stood firm in my values. Through Emily, I found out that Brittany is still single. Apparently, she's dated several guys, but the same thing always happens. As soon as they start talking about serious commitment, she starts with her material expectations, and they run away. According to Emily, her parents keep pressuring her to find someone with money who can give her the life they think she deserves, and it's a vicious circle where she's never going to be happy because she's looking for the wrong things. Sometimes I think about everything that happened and wonder if I could have handled something differently, but honestly, I don't think so. I was clear from the beginning about who I was and what was important to me. Brittany was the one who changed. Or maybe she was always like that and just acted for 2 years. I don't know. What I do know is that making that decision to end the engagement was difficult at the time, but it was the best thing I could have done. I don't regret it at all. 0. Because I maintained my integrity and my values, and that's worth more than any perfect wedding or any relationship based on compromises that betray who you are. My sister Amy eventually apologized to me. She told me she hadn't understood the magnitude of what Brittany was asking until she saw what happened with Matthew and realized there really was a pattern there. My parents were on my side from the beginning. My dad told me he was proud of me for not giving in, that I had shown I had the same backbone he tried to teach me. That meant a lot to me, honestly. Now, when I see weddings on Instagram or Facebook, like those extravagant weddings where everything is perfect and luxurious, I don't feel envy or regret. I feel something like pity, I guess. Because I wonder how many of those couples started their marriage with huge debts, how many are still paying for that party years later, how many got divorced before finishing paying it all off. I wonder how many of those marriages are really based on love and compatibility versus how many are based on appearances and social expectations. Last week, I was at my cabin, and my girlfriend asked me what kind of wedding I'd want if we ever got married. This is super premature still. We've only been together a few months, but it was an interesting conversation. I told her something small at the lake, maybe 30 people, food we could cook ourselves or with family help, music from a playlist on Bluetooth speakers, and she smiled and said that sounded perfect. In that moment, I knew I had found someone truly compatible. Someone who understands that what's important isn't the party but the commitment. It's not impressing others, but building a life together based on shared values. I don't know what the future holds for Brittany. Honestly, I hope she eventually finds what she's looking for, or better yet, that she understands she's looking for the wrong things. But that's no longer my problem or my responsibility. I'm doing well. I have my cabin. I have my savings intact and growing. I have a new and healthy relationship. And above all, I have my peace of mind, knowing I didn't compromise who I am for someone else's expectations. And that, honestly, is priceless.